Hi everybody and welcome to Trasna and Tíre lecture this evening. I'm delighted to be joined by Quincey Dougan, who runs a Facebook page called Bygone Days. He has published many books and they cover many aspects of our history, including the history of the Orange Order in Ireland, which he's covering with us here this evening. Many people in Ireland, particularly in the south, wouldn't realise that the Orange Order was in every one of the 32 counties in Ireland. They stretch from Kerry, where I'm from myself, to even as far removed as Achill Island, where my mother is from. So I'm thrilled to welcome Quincey to Trasna and Tíre, and hopefully we'll have a very educational evening, another facet of our Irish history that we are uncovering. So over to you, Quincey.
Thank you, Liam, and thank you to Trasna and Tíre for the opportunity to speak to a new audience this evening. As per Liam's introduction, my name is Quincey Dougan. I'm from a picturesquely named little hamlet called Red Rock, which is smack bang in the middle of County Armagh, perhaps on the fringes of South Armagh. I'm an Orange man. I'm from the Black North and I'm an Orange man. That's my family heritage. And it's partially how I got interested in this subject matter. My mother's family are from just outside Castle Blaney in County Monaghan. And I always had an interest in the orange culture from that area. And that spread to Leitrim and Mayo. And I started discovering new aspects of Orange history outside of Ulster that are very rarely heard about, and I started to really get into them in depth. Tonight's presentation is really meant to be an overview of the subject matter. It's entitled The Forgotten Order. What that is from, very obvious, a forgotten Orange Order, a forgotten order. And the way I'm going to do this tonight is we're going to look at the whole of Ireland, but use 6 case studies, 6 counties, really to give a good in-depth feel of the subject matter. So with no further ado, we'll get stuck in. Now, I'm conscious, as I was saying to Liam at the start, I'm conscious that sometimes from north and south, we sometimes assume everybody else knows what we're talking about and what things are, but of course that's not the case. So for the uninitiated, to try and paint a picture of some of the terminology used. Now, Orangeism is and always has been organised underneath the Grand Orange Lodge of Ireland. That is the universal oversight, the overseeing body. But it starts at the very bottom tier. Now, at the very bottom tier, we have the Orange Lodge, basically a club under a different name, the Orange Lodge. And that is conferred by warrant. Grand Orange Lodge of Ireland give permission to hold this lodge, and that's where the number comes from on this warrant. So I personally am a member of the LOL, Loyal Orange Lodge 788, which is based here in Red Rock. Now, within these lodges, you have quite normal fraternity, if you like, selection of officers. The chairman is the worshipful master. Vice chair is the deputy master. There's a secretary, there's a treasurer, there's a chaplain, the organisation being founded in the Reformed faith. The members are brothers, they're brethren. Now, what happens is Orange Lodges in a district, in a certain area, a geographical area, will come together and form a district, and they elect officers to a district lodge. So, for example, a Sligo Lodge, LOL 464, the Star of Connacht, it joined together with other lodges in County Sligo and formed a district lodge, District LOL 1, which was based in Sligo town. It was basically an overseeing mechanism to coordinate activities, etc. Then these district lodges would come together and form county grand lodges. And this is the interesting aspect when we're looking at Southern Ireland. There obviously has to be a numerical strength and necessity to form these county grand lodges. So the Star of Connacht, LOL 64, was a constituent lodge of a district Loyal Orange Lodge 1 Sligo town, who were a constituent district of 3 districts that formed up the County Sligo County Grand Orange Lodge. Then each of these County Grand Lodges works underneath directly the Grand Orange Lodge of Ireland. So very much a tiered system, and all of it is democratic, totally democratically elected. The lodge at the bottom elects its officers to the district, to the lodge. Then the district, those different lodge representatives elect district officers, and then a county level, grand lodge level, etc. So that's just to try and explain when I'm talking about lodges, county lodges, district lodges. So our lecture proper, the forgotten order. To the glorious, pious and immortal memory of the great and good King William, not forgetting Oliver Cromwell, who assisted in redeeming us from popery, slavery, arbitrary power, brass money and wooden shoes. May we never want a Williamite to kick the ass of a Jacobite, and a fart for the Bishop of Cork. And he that won't drink this, whether he be a priest, bishop, deacon, bellows blower, grave digger, or any other of the fraternity of the clergy, may a north wind blow him to the south, and a west wind to the east. May he have a dark night, a lee shore, a rank storm, and a leaky vessel to carry him over the river Styx. May the dog Cerberus jump down his throat with a red hot harrow, with every pin tear out a gut, and blow him with a clean carcass to hell. Amen. Now that is the charter toast of the aldermen of Skinner's Alley. That was formed in 1688, and with the legitimate claim of being the first ever Orange organisation in Ireland. That aldermen toast to the glorious, pious and immortal memory was utilised by Orange men following the formation of the Orange Institution in 1795 in Loughgall, County Armagh. At one point in history, that toast was being said in every county of Ireland. Whilst its stronghold was, of course, Ulster, just 3 years after the formation of the institutions, this is 1798, of what is now colloquially known as the Orange Order, lodges covered most of Ireland. Now, the records are incomplete, they're partial, and there's actually evidence starting to emerge that there were lots and lots more undocumented lodges. But that year in 1798, we know factually there were at least 10 lodges in Carlow, which was more than County Londonderry. Leitrim had 8, Offaly 5, Westmeath 4, Longford 4, Tipperary, Cork, Wicklow, Roscommon and Meath each had 3. Limerick, Dublin, Sligo, Louth, Galway and Laois each had 2. And even Kilkenny, Kildare, Wexford and Waterford had a lodge. By 1824, every single lodge had a verifiable, every single Irish county had its own verifiable Orange presence. Now in the province of Leinster, early Orange lodges, infamously or famously, depending on your perspective, played a direct role in facing down the United Irishmen in both counties in Wexford and Wicklow. And both counties eventually would muster very strong county grand lodges. By 1836, Wicklow was operating 10 lodges in 4 districts with just over 1,300 men. Orangism was numerically strong enough during the 19th century to justify the existence of these county grand lodges in Longford, Offaly, Laois, Westmeath, Dublin County, Meath and Louth. And then that means they all had separate lodges that were formed into districts, formed into counties. And then within them, there were individual lodges from Kildare, Carlow and Kilkenny operating. It'll be no surprise, however, we're going to ease you in here with probably the least surprising one. that the stronghold of Leinster Orangeism was Dublin City. On the 11th anniversary of the Battle of the Boyne, so that's the 1st of July 1701, a statue of King William III was erected in Dublin's College Green. For almost the full century to follow, the College Green statue facilitated public ritual in Dublin City that long before the formation of the Orange Institution, Orange Order, 1795, were definitely Williamite, and would also come to be reasonably defined as Orange traditions, namely parades, commemorations, bonfires, fireworks, and church ceremonies. When the Orange Institution was formed in 1795, it took less than 2 years for the new order to reach Dublin. On the 4th of June 1797, Loyal Orange Lodge 176 opened, and it was comprised of 300 gentlemen. This was the catalyst, really, that turned the new Orange Institution into a national movement. Hugely influential figures from across the island. By 1835, the City of Dublin Grand Orange Lodge. There was one for the City of Dublin and one for the County of Dublin. The City of Dublin had 15 lodges. By the 1840s, that had risen to 31, and it reached a peak in the 1850s when it could boast an incredible 43 working Orange lodges. By the 1880s, still with 30 lodges working in 3 districts, just entitled 1, 2, and 3, it had a membership of 4,000 Orangemen. Lodge titles were operational, including the Old Bridge Orange Lodge, the Duke of York Orange Lodge, the Wesley Orange Lodge, Latimer, No Surrender, King William, Diamond, and Enniskillen. So all of that imagery very much present within the Dublin institution. During its existence, the Dublin Orange Institution utilised many properties for its business within the confines of the city, with some of the most notable and famous Dublin buildings used, like the Mansion House, Dublin Metropolitan Hall, and the Rotunda. The most prominent during its history for Orangeism to use the buildings were purchased in what was both a central and high profile location in the city, Rutland Square. And from 1879, the new home of the institution was officially 10 Rutland Square East. In 1907, it was decided to build an annex to the rear of this. At this time, the hall was being referenced as one of the very few buildings in Dublin where the Union Jack flies almost daily. On the 10th of November 1908, the Fowler Memorial Hall was officially opened at the final cost of, for then, quite astronomical cost of £2,500. Alongside many meeting rooms and side rooms, the annex contained a ground floor and a first floor hall. Each of those was said to be able to hold comfortably 800 people. By 1937, there were just 8 male Orange Lodges working in Dublin, alongside 4 of a senior loyal order, the Black Preceptories. By 1953, there were 5 remaining, and that strength was maintained right through to 1965. Now, despite declining numbers, the Dubliners unsurprisingly continued to travel north each July to commemorate the Battle of the Boyne. On the platform in Rosnowla in 1982, Brother Edward McGuigan, stating that he represented the Orangemen of Dublin and Wicklow, caused controversy that appeared in many papers nationally when he told the assembled crowd, primarily Orangemen from the Republic and their families, that I have lived in the city of Dublin for 50 years now, but I dare not put my collaret on me. I could not wear my collaret in Dublin, and if I did, it would be a short way to commit suicide. Now, Orangeism was in every county of Leinster and quite deeply entrenched in quite a few. But arguably the most fascinating episode of Leinster Orange history is a pretty much mass revival of the movement that took place in Kings County, County Offaly, in the 1880s. Despite having its own share of lodges in the early days of the institution, by 1880, whilst there were still Orangemen in the county, it was essentially dormant. As a direct response to the land campaigns that began in 1879 circa, local Protestants actively searched for means to band together for mutual protection, and the local means chosen was Orangeism. After several decades effectively in abeyance, in a flurry of new activity, there were Orange lodges formed in Kings County and neighbouring counties. The first new lodge to come was in the Kings County capital of Parsonstown, Birr, officially renamed in 1899 to Birr. A once active warrant number. So an old lodge that had been active, LOL 1809, was re-granted to that county, to Parsonstown, on the 15th of March 1881. And within the next 8 months, 3 other lodges were formed at Aginconn, at Leap Castle, famous Leap Castle, at Golden Grove, and in Shinrone. And in December 1881 then, official permission was granted by the Grand Orange Lodge of Ireland to reform the long defunct Kings County Grand Orange Lodge to oversee local Orangeism. In the few years to follow, further lodges were formed at Edenderry, at Tullamore, Nina and Rosscray in Tipperary, Woodford in Galway, Rathdowney in Queen's County, Laois, and Rathangan in County Kildare. A further lodge that already was working, and you know it's great history in its own right because it worked continually from the beginning. A further lodge that was working in Athlone, Westmeath, came under the wings of this new county lodge, bringing it to its peak of 11 lodges. And just for the terminology and to get to grips with the numbers, so we have the LOL 788 Nina, 962 Golden Grove, LOL 963 Shinrone, known as the Shinrone No Surrender Orange Lodge. 764 was based at Tullamore, but later was moved and reformed in Woodford in Galway. 981 was Edenderry. 1242 was Rathdowney in Queens. 1809 Parsonstown. 1811 was the Aginconn True Blues Orange Lodge, and it was later renamed to the Leap Independent Orange Lodge in 1885. LOL 1915 in Athlone was known as the De Ginkle Orange Lodge, after one of King William's generals. LOL 2047, 2047 was at Rosscray, and LOL 2051 was at Rathangan, which was in County Kildare. Now, no doubt helped by some really strong and wealthy patronage, the Earl of Ross. By December 1881, so just 9 months after this whole movement has been reborn, Parsonstown Orange Lodge had a membership of this just one Orange Lodge of 132 brethren. And it in particular left a substantial legacy in Parsonstown, in Birr, still very much seen today. In the centre of the town sits Birr Theatre and Arts Centre. Birr Theatre and Arts Centre was in fact an Orange Hall. Officially opened in January 1889, the Oxman Town Hall. By the 1890s, it was listed in the Grand Orange Lodge of Ireland Registry by the Parsonstown Orange Lodge as their Orange Hall. Arguably the most important figure beyond Ross of the Kings County Orangemen during the lifetime of the body was a man called William Peasley Hutchison Lloyd Vaughan. He was a County Grand Master of Kings County for over 25 years, and he officiated over the County Grand Lodge from his impressive home at Golden Grove in the very deep south of the county and just a short distance from Roscrea and Tipperary. For over 2 decades, Golden Grove sort of became the focal point for Orange demonstrations and rallies. And even within it, he had dedicated a dedicated part of the hall that were called its Orange Rooms and is referred to as the Golden Grove Orange Hall. It was there that his own lodge met, the Golden Grove LOL 962, of which he was also the worshipful master, the chairman, if you like, during its entire existence of 34 years. The area of Kings County with the most orange reputation was Shinrone. One contemporary history described it as a hotbed of rampant orangism. That was the 1830s. Bandon, in Cork's loyal and orange credentials, gave it the moniker of the Derry of Munster, which we'll look at shortly. But Shinrone was often referred to as the Derry of Leinster, as in this affinity with the maiden city of Londonderry in the northwest. At least 2 active lodges had once existed in the town, but like elsewhere they had fallen to the wayside, only for the custom to be revived in 1881. LOL 963, Shinrone No Surrender, came into being in November 1881 with its first worshipful master, George Friend. As an aside, but not unrelated, George Friend, aged 70, was murdered in 1921. The period from 1885, 1886 to 1890, this was really the peak of the golden years of this revived County Orange institution, with large numbers mustering each year to celebrate the main Orange anniversary dates. What seems to be the largest ever muster of affiliated Orange men took place on the 12th of July 1887 at Golden Grove, when the Irish Times claimed that there were 1,400 people present. The gathering included the membership of 8 lodges, who in traditional Orange fashion actually held a parade within the grounds of the house, headed that day by a band they had brought in for the occasion, the Dublin Orange Fife and Drum Band. The last public statement from the County Grand Lodge, the King's County Grand Orange Lodge, came in April 1912 on Home Rule. In June 1913, following the presentation of a committee report to Grand Lodge, the Grand Orange Lodge of Ireland, it was proposed and seconded that the County Grand Lodge be dissolved. 3 of the Orange halls that were utilised during that period were actually attacked and burnt in 1922. Now, in Munster, Tipperary had a county structure with places like Cloughjordan, regarded as an Orange heartland, but the undoubted core of Orange tradition lay in Cork. And that story, most people will have a fair inkling of, can only begin in one place, that of the village of Bandon. Folklore states that the gates of Bandon once boasted the couplet, "A Jew, a Turk, or an atheist may live in this town, but no papist." Well, the sign never existed. It's a myth that was actually given birth to via the contents of a Dean Swift poem. But another phrase was commonly used about the West Cork town. Even the pigs are Protestant. Prior to the Glorious Revolution, such was the fear of James II's representative in Ireland, Richard Talbot, that lying Dick Talbot, that Bandon and Cork would rebel, that he sent detachments of troops to take the 2 towns, Bandon and Cork. The Bandonians displayed a banner with the motto, "No Surrender." And a tradition really was born, with the Latin phrase "ne sede," no surrender, taking its place in the town coat of arms. The use of the phrase prior to the siege of Derry, where it became embedded in folk memory, possibly in affinity with the maiden city of Londonderry as a fallow walled municipality, and the attachment of Bandon forces with Londonderry, with Derry soldiers at the Battle of the Boyne, led to the adoption of Bandon being colloquially known as the Derry of the South, or the Derry of Munster, or indeed just Southern Derry. And Cork Orangeism as a whole came to take this designation as their own and revel in being Southern Derry. The first Orange Lodge, as we now recognise them, was present in Bandon from at least 1797. In July 1835, there was a fireworks display in Bandon to celebrate the 30th anniversary of its introduction into the town. Cork City Lodges had soon followed, with an article in the Warder and Dublin Weekly Mail in July 1833 stating that the Mother Lodge of Cork, LOL 1014, was formed in 1799. And incidentally, from it, all other city lodges had either sprung or divided. In 1834, a registry of lodges detailed that there were 21 now in County Cork. Over half of those were based in Cork City and Bandon. Under the leadership at that time of Robert Hedges R of Macroom Castle, the lodges also covered Fermoy, Kilcrea, Inishannon, Macroom, Ballincollig, Mill Street and Dunmanway. In early 1840s, the Cork City Institution moved to new premises, which would remain their home until the demise of the organisation, number 23 Tuckey Street. In the 1856 Grand Orange Lodge of Ireland warrant register, there were 8 separate Orange Lodges who were utilising Tuckey Street Orange Hall as their monthly meeting place. By 1856, a county structure of Orangeism was really thriving strongly, with 30 lodges working across 4 districts, covering the entirety of the county. District 1 was the city of Cork. District 2, Bandon. They called themselves Southern Derry District. District 3 was Dunmanway, and District 4 was Macroom. Throughout the 19th century, at some point, Orangeism reached almost every outpost and corner of Cork. Now, the title for the most southwesterly Orange Lodge in the entirety of Ireland that we know about falls to LOL 1341, based in Bantry. They reflect this pride in Cork being Derry of the South they decided to take the moniker Western Derry Orange Lodge. The Bantry Orange Lodge, LOL 1341, Western Derry Orange Lodge. Now, while Cork City had its own dedicated orange rooms, Bandon was not going to be outdone. And no doubt in a conscious desire to live up to its orange credentials, it began construction of a purpose-built orange hall in 1871 in Castle Street. That's now Mahoney Avenue. Built at the then substantial cost of over £300. It was opened on the 12th of July that year by Colonel H.B. Bernard and his nephew Lord Bernard, alongside the Bandon District Master, who was a brother R.W. Doherty. On reporting of the opening, the Belfast newsletter remarked that Orangeism in Bandon was flourishing and still had 5 strong Orange Lodges, each in excellent working order. Now, this is a great story. This is a great aspect. Really, why some of these Trasna lectures are so brilliant, because they're introducing really surprises and stuff that I think emphasises the complexity and the contradictions of Irish history. Now, these are really well illustrated via the person of County Grand Lodge of Cork's County Grand Master. That is the supreme master of the county, overseeing all of the lodges in the county from 1881 to 1892. Dominic Ronayne Patrick Sarsfield of Dockline was a descendant of the Patrick Sarsfield, first Earl of Lucan, who had played such an instrumental role as one of James II's generals during the Williamite War. The man who is alleged to famously have said about whenever James done his flit from Ireland that, but just change generals and we'll fight again. At the June 1883 meeting of the Grand Orange Lodge of Ireland, this ruling body, held in Coleraine, probably the furthest that Sarsfield ever could travel to an Orange meeting, he seconded a motion. It was just generally espousing the principles of Orangism, but he also took the opportunity to tell those assembled that he came forward to show that there was a live Orange man in the County Cork. Now, by the onset of the 20th century, it is apparent that only 2 Orange lodges were now active in Cork: 798 LOL 798 in Bandon and LOL 983 in Cork City. In 1906, the members of both of these lodges joined together to celebrate the 12th, where they sat down to a supper and a social evening. The last County Grand Master of Cork before the County Grand Lodge folded was Arthur Ward, an auctioneer's clerk, and the last communication between Cork Orangism and the Grand Orange Lodge of Ireland took place in 1919. The years to follow were, of course, tempestuous, to say the least, in Cork, with the Irish War of Independence, Civil War, delivering many hundreds of deaths in the county. On the night of the 11th of July, early morning of the 12th of July, 1920, of course, hugely symbolic date for Orangism and Orangemen, the house of the last County Grand Master of Cork, Arthur Ward, was attacked by a body of 20 volunteers and burned to the ground. Arthur's wife, 61-year-old Mary Ann Ward, died during that attack. In 1875, number 97 George Street in Limerick City, now better known as O'Connell Street, was purchased by the Limerick Protestant Young Men's Association. On different occasions, the premises performed the role of the HQ for some of Limerick's Masonic lodges, but perhaps of more interest is its use for another lesser-known body. Number 97 George Street was at one time a meeting place for the County Limerick County Grand Orange Lodge. Like other counties far from Armagh, organised Orangism is likely to have arrived in Limerick via the ranks of the military in 1798 during the rebellion. And in the first list we have of Orange lodges, a list formulated by Grand Lodge, it was noted that by May 1798 there were 2 Orange lodges in Limerick City itself. By 1836 there were 9 within County Limerick working underneath a County Grand Lodge structure. And there was at least one other that was working underneath that structure but outside of the county boundary, namely LOL 1373 in County Clare, the Killaloe Orange Lodge. We have details of a few others. LOL 1627 was based in Limerick City under Worshipful Master Ralph Hill. LOL 1060 was in Rathkeil. There was alleged to have been a Huguenot, a Palatine, an Orange Lodge made up solely of Palatines. And LOL 1659 was in Adair underneath a William Bell. Now, there was a mass meeting of Orangism in Limerick in 1839 in the city's Northumberland rooms. And that gathering was said to have the twofold purpose of guarding the Protestants of the South against the dangers to which they have been exposed and to promote the general advancement of Protestantism. There was around 250 people in attendance at that meeting, Orangemen, with Captain Chidley Coote, who was the County Grand Master of Queen's County, Laois, who taking the chair. There was a very, very detailed report read out by the County Grand Lodge Secretary, John Fleming, and thanks to the newspapers of the day, they reported on this verbatim. And that detailed the full extent of Orangeism within the city and county of Limerick. And he stated that membership now comprised almost 800 brethren, 800 Limerick Orangemen, and a few in County Clare. By the 1840s, the famine was, of course, accompanied by an increasing series of attacks on landlords, their agents, their employees. One of the most relevant to this subject matter came on Thursday, the 18th of November, 1847, when Ralph Hill, the previously mentioned worshipful master of LOL 1627 and a former county grand master of the Limerick Orange Institution, also a former sergeant in the Limerick militia, was murdered. He was a land agent from Clare Street in Limerick. That day, he and another man, a very common narrative, tasked with recovering corn from a farmer on the fringe of the city that had not paid rent. He was greeted with 3 shots to the right of the head. Now, a further listing of lodges that we have access to underneath the auspices of Limerick appeared in 1856, with this time 8 lodges shown as working underneath Limerick District, Annis District, County Clare, and Tralee District, County Kerry. In 1869, the number of Limerick Orange lodges hit their peak, with 15 lodges now existing. But despite apparent numerical strength, there was no County Grand Lodge structure. This sometimes happened in the absence of a suitable high-profile figure to take the leadership role. But by 1871, there was an obvious attempt to band it together. And 1871 actually saw the Limerick District formed, a Limerick District that worked underneath the County Grand Lodge of Cork. 3 years later, in 1874, it once again became a County Grand Lodge in its own right, underneath the leadership of Charles Monk Wilson, who would eventually prove to be the last ever County Limerick Grand Master. In 1882, an Orange Lodge under Limerick control applied to the Grand Lodge of Ireland to be granted a title that is perhaps one of the most unusual and colourful in the entire history of the Orange Institution. LOL 2044 were based in Tralee, County Kerry, and had requested that they be allowed to call themselves the Kingdom of Kerry Loyal Orange Lodge. A few years later, another County Kerry Orange Lodge based in Tralee, we know also applied to get its own particular label, LOL 2041. It desired to call itself the Albert Edward Orange Lodge, of course after the then King of England. By 1891, there were only 4 lodges recorded as working in Limerick. The Limerick District Lodges of 1081, that is the Schomberg Orange Lodge. And that was underneath, the worshipful master of it was also County Master, that was underneath Charles Monk Wilson. And there was also another lodge in Limerick, LOL 2024, underneath a Gordon O'Neill. And then there was also the Tralee District operational, with the 2 previously mentioned lodges active, 2044 and 2049. By 1899, 3 of those lodges had become defunct. There was only 1 remaining, and that County Grand Lodge of Limerick was dissolved. The last Limerick Orange Lodge was the Schomberg, LOL 1080, the last working Orange Lodge in Limerick, and it survived until the early years of the 20th century, just prior to the Great War. And we come to Connacht. The Battle of the Diamond in Loughgall, 1795, that saw the birth of Orangeism, also indirectly guaranteed that that institution in Connacht would be ensured a particularly hostile reception. The battle in North Armagh, this situation in North Armagh, resulted in an exodus of the local Catholic population, many of whom took the Oliver Cromwell penned advice and go to hell or Connacht. But nevertheless, Leitrim and Sligo very soon could boast their own county Grand Orange lodges. Roscommon maintained an Orange presence in Boyle until right up and into the 20th century. Another surprising location, Galway had at least 2 Orange lodges in the earliest days of the institution. And even Galway managed to muster negative press from its early 12th celebrations. By 1880, those lodges had been long gone, perhaps for as much as half a century. But that same decade came the King's County revival. And the newspaper coverage in the late 1880s, on several occasions, it's referenced that Orange men from Aughrim and from East Galway were in attendance at Orange events in King's County. By 1891, we have a verifiable Orange Lodge, and that was meeting at Woodford in the county. The 1891 Worshipful Master of LOL 974 Woodford was Thomas Walsh. Now, it's just an interesting aside, all the historians out there, in trying to find out more about Thomas Walsh, of course, the first port of call was the census. So we did the search in 1901, and there were 199 Thomas Walshes in County Galway in 1901. Phenomenal amount of Walshes. But there was only one Protestant Thomas Walsh. He was 50 and he was a farmer from a place called Kelly's Grove, not a great distance from Woodford. So I think it's fair to say that conjecture would weigh on this positive side that was our worshipful master of the Woodford Orange Lodge. Whilst all was a small Protestant population and widely dispersed, by 1835 there were 6 working Mayo Orange Lodges. LOL 807 was based in Turlock with its worshipful master J. McAdams. Incidentally, Turlock is the only place in County Mayo that it's ever referenced to have been an orange parade having taken place, and even then it's only referenced in folklore, likely just to have been orange yeomanry. LOL 1023 set in Foxford district. Foxford, famous for its woolen industry, had quite a strong Scottish contingent of Protestants, which quite possibly was the cause of this. And it was underneath the worshipful master, the Reverend George Giles. Now, he's interesting because in contrast to the very commonly promoted perception that many Irish Anglican clergy in the famine era were only interested in spiritual well-being of Irish Catholics, Giles is on record on several occasions as campaigning and lobbying really strongly for all of the destitute in his locality, without exception. There's an interesting incident in 1832 when a Sergeant Nixon in the Foxford Constabulary was removed from his post for the crime of displaying orange lilies in the windows of his apartments in the barracks from the 1st to the 12th of July. In the Ballina area, the Reverend James Houston was the worshipful master. While the legacy of the Spanish Armada, its failed attempt to invade England in the 16th century, and the subsequent shipwreck and survival of a small number of sailors on the northwest of coast of Connacht, was apparent, very apparent, in the name of the Castle Bar Orange Lodge worshipful master. He was the very colourfully named Ferdinand Langston, probably the only Orange man ever called Ferdinand. And that was the Loyal Orange Lodge 1266. And he was actually the keeper of a public house, we were able to find out, in Castle Street in the town. The Master of Erris, 1267, was William Bingham, another famous figure, a direct descendant of the Dorset-born Sir Richard Bingham, originally sent to Ireland by Elizabeth I to quell rebellion all those decades, centuries previously. And finally, LOA 1502 was in Mullafari, Mulnafani, in the vicinity of Killala, with Robert Eakins, worshipful master. Now, knowledge of another really surprising County Mayo orange presence emerged in circa 2015 at an auction in Dublin, when a medal, a solid silver medal, appeared for auction. And that medal was for LOL 1854, Achill Island, the Achill Island Orange Lodge. Achill Island during that period was, of course, the site of very forthright Protestant missionary work. And the establishment of a lodge may have came via the placement of Charles Henry Seymour as rector from Achill from 1847 to 1850. Seymour was a very respected Grand Chaplain of the Orange Institution, so that's right at the top level of the Grand Orange Lodge of Ireland. Records note that he was a worshipful master of this lodge at one point, and records note, interestingly, that in 1854 he vouched for a Roman Catholic convert on the island, Richard McCune, to join the lodge. LOL 786 were also active. That was at Ordinary, and that was just outside Ballina. And Ordinary sat in what we believe was the only Orange Hall in Mayo, the Ordinary Orange Hall. And it was the last operational County Mayo Grand Orange Lodge underneath worshipful master Charles Furr, and it was closed in 1901. But even so, the 20th century, there were still a Mayo Orange Lodge operational. And finally, in Connacht, given its status as the sole Connacht county bordering Ulster, it's no surprise that it became by far the most orange of the county, or Orange County of the province, Leitrim. And Leitrim organised orange lodges in the county were not far behind the diamond migrants, and via the ranks of militia and yeomanry, not exclusively so. By 1798, there were at least 8 Leitrim orange lodges. In these early years, they were concentrated very much in the marshes of south-east Leitrim, on the fringes of Cavan and North Longford. LOL 404 was listed as covering the Carrigallen district. LOL 456, sitting at Drumsna, under the leadership of a Mr. Waldron, was recorded as having a membership of 250 brethren. In the mid-1920s, there was substantial and violent opposition to Orange Parades across the south of Ireland, but particularly in County Leitrim. There were very serious disturbances in Drumahare, Carrigallen, Newton Gore, Drumshambo and Manorhamilton from 1826 to 1829. But parades, even with that, remained a regular occurrence across the county. Such as that in 1848, there was a 12th of July procession that took place in Newton Gore, with one paper estimating the number of participants as between 4,000 and 5,000. The 1891 Registry of Orange Lodges gives us a great visible, and enables us to make a great visible picture of Leitrim Orangism, indicates the scale and breadth of it. There were 4 operational districts, namely Newtown Gore in the southeast, Carrigallen in the south, Leitrim district, named after probably Leitrim village in the southwest, which also included the Boyle Orange Lodge from Roscommon, and then the Manorhamilton Orange district in the north of the county. So in 1891 there were 20 Orange Lodges probably the most interesting, more unusual places that there were Orange Lodges in Kinloch, and indeed at Loch Rinn, and the ancestral home, of course, of Lord Leitrim. The Loch Rinn Orange Lodge were one of the very, very few bodies that posted positive obituary notices following the murder of the third Lord Leitrim. Now, in 1907, there actually still was a 12th of July parade in Connacht. In 1907, there was a 12th of July parade in the village of Carrigallen. It was the last ever to take place in Leitrim. There's a really interesting, vibrant period shortly after that. Now, almost all of the Northern Orange Lodges, the Northern Leitrim Orange Lodges, had disappeared by now, bar Drumahur, the Bowie Orange Lodge. But in this southeast corner, there was a real strong resurgence. And between 1909 and 1913, there were a pretty astounding 7 orange halls, dedicated orange buildings that were erected. These are new halls for the Orange Lodges of Culleys, Kiva, Killygar, Offaly, Drumhinshin Gore, and Newtown Gore in the very southwest of the county. While in the north, Bowie, it built its own orange hall in 1909 near Drumahur. The County Grand Lodge of Leitrim minutes for its meeting of Saturday, the 12th of November 1921, contained the following line. The Lodge decided to send 6 applications to the Lord Enniskillen Memorial Orphan Fund for the orphans of Brother Harrison, who was brutally murdered by Sinn Féiners. At 4 a.m. on the morning of the 22nd of April 1921, there was a violent hammering at the door of the 53-year-old father's home. In the aftermath, the report from a senior police officer stated he was taken a short distance and apparently fell with the blow of an axe or some such similar weapon on the back of his head. 2 shots were then fired of his body, into his body, and around his neck had been hung a card saying, "Convicted Spy, IRA." He was a member of Loyal Orange Lodge 332, Corgyar, which was just outside Ballinamore. In 1931, it was decided that for the first time since 1907, Leitrim would host a 12th procession in Newtown Gore. The night before the parade, Newtown Gore Orangemen erected a platform in a field opposite the local church. However, just after 10 a.m. on the morning of the 12th, hundreds of men armed with butts and sticks of all descriptions entered the village, tore down the platform, at the same time erecting a tricolor. The roads into Newtown Gore were all blocked, and those Orangemen who were heading to the gathering turned away. The onset of the Troubles in Northern Ireland in the late 1960s placed a particularly new strain on Leitrim Orangism that it had never experienced in the previous 170 years. Being on the periphery of Ulster, and especially because of its border with Fermanagh, republicanism had a firm base in Leitrim, including active terrorist units. Fear of reprisal undoubtedly made many reluctant to continue to be associated with local Orangism. As quoted in the book, Protestants in a Catholic State, fellows were afraid to be seen going down to their lodges. Orangism struggled on, but the Leitrim institution that had entered the 1960s with 7 lodges by the end of the turbulent 1970s was reduced to just 2. Culleys, LOL 14C, and Killygar 404. Now, from a presence across the entirety of Ireland in the early 19th century, by the time of the disestablishment of the Church of Ireland, Orangism had already been forced out of the most hostile parts of the island. Land wars that lasted throughout the final few decades of the 19th century had a mixed effect. For some places like Kings County, Offaly and Leitrim, it actually was a stimulus to reform and revitalise and strengthen. For others like Cork, revival was difficult because of the really broad dispersal of Protestantism what's really interesting is that whilst it's sometimes Southern Orangeism is pointed as being very much a gently led high class level of a membership, it wasn't always the case. And where the membership was of those working classes, these lower classes, Orangeism was very, very difficult to extinguish, and it kept going. The County Grand Lodges of Limerick, Louth and Limerick, folded in 1899, but as late as 1914, there were still 70 Orange Lodges working outside Ulster, underneath the auspices of about 10 counties. The Anglo-Irish and Civil Wars hastened their decline further, with parades stopped. A large number of Orange Halls were destroyed, or buildings that had once been utilised as Orange Halls. And several quite prominent Orange men right across the south and west were murdered. By the late 1930s, only Dublin, Wicklow, Leitrim and Louth had active lodges. Today, there are 3 Orange Lodges left in the south and west of Ireland outside of Ulster. There's 2 Orange Lodges in County Leitrim, and there is an Orange Lodge in Dublin. All 3 have their own Orange Halls, and all 3 are active and very, very, very busy. They have large schedules, and they participate in a large number of events. A forgotten order. It's a forgotten Ireland. It's a hugely important yet forgotten part of Irish history. And so ends our lecture for this evening. I've tried to be, this isn't propaganda. It's not attempted to be propaganda. It's factually based. I think the prime motivation and goals from this are to emphasize that there isn't just one narrative of Irish history. There isn't just one ideal of a romantic Ireland, and that there was never this homogenous, perfect, loving, all Ireland community. Thanks very much. If I want to hand back to Liam, if anybody wants to ask a few questions.
Thank you so much, Quincey. I certainly learned a lot of Irish history I hadn't been aware of in the last hour. That was an absolutely fascinating lecture. There's loads of feedback coming in on the chat. I'll be able to send it on to you on email tomorrow. I'm not going to get to all of the questions, but it's all hugely positive. I'm just going to take a couple of them now for you, Quincey, if that's okay with you.
No problem.
What was the Black Preceptory, and what was the difference between that and the Orange Order?
The Royal Black Preceptories is like a senior institution. You have to be a member of the Orange Institution to be a member of this Royal Black Preceptory. It's largely more ceremonial. It's largely more religious based and centered, and there's much less emphasis on the processions and social side of it, I suppose. A more exclusive version of Orangeism, if you like. Its famous day for the Black Preceptory is, of course, Sciarva in County Down on the 13th of July every year, where they have the Sciarva Sham fight, where they reenact King James and King William's battle with the same outcome every year, it has to be said. That's incidentally one of the biggest events in the whole of Ireland. It attracts over 100,000 people. Not this year, unfortunately.
Yeah, all of our history commemorations are taking a knock this year, unfortunately. That's probably why we're here on Zoom this evening rather than anything else. I have a question from local man here, Vincent Dempsey. He's saying, fascinating lecture. Why was the membership of the Loyal Orange Lodge in opposition to popery, or was it a Masonic club for social and business support? It
primarily, and I would I would imagine there will be historians that would like to take issue with this, but primarily, you know, Orangism was a very benign organization, amazingly, because the vast majority of its activities were social activities. You know, it was simply similar to many other types of organizations that were formed in Ireland and across the world. People of a shared world view, if you like, who were coming together to interact, socialize. Sometimes that verged into mutual protection. Sometimes it verged into other forms of mutual help. But mostly this was a social institution.
Great. Thanks for that, Quincey. I have another question here that I think it'll be of interest to a lot of people. Where are all these so you've obviously done extensive research, and a lot of people down this neck of the woods might want to research their local history in terms of their local lodges. Where are all these records held?
Well, our first port of call is, of course, Grand Lodge of Ireland. There you have, which you can access if you request Schomburg House, whenever it's back operational. They'll quite happily let people peruse their library. So you have all the minutes, first of all, of Grand Lodge, basically right back to the late 1820s, and other selected stuff right back to the beginning. So we have references in these minutes to work from. Then we have registers, occasional registers, and this was when every now and again a county grand secretary or a Grand Orange Lodge secretary took it upon himself to catalogue everything. So there are partial registers because they were never completed, because this is a mammoth undertaking. You know, over 2,000 Orange Lodges at one point in a different communication era for most of its history. So very few of them were ever completed. But we have partial registers for 1798, for 1823, for 1834, for 1856, 1875, and 1891. And those on their own are an invaluable source for lodge warrant numbers. Then you get, you know, maybe a worshipful master, the meeting place, and then sometimes you'll have notes on the lodge history within them, and you will have maybe also notes when the lodge folded or the lodge came into being. So you have those there. These are the primary sources you have. There are some surviving direct records from lodges. Like, for instance, there's very early minute books for County Leitrim. There are some private lodges, like from Dublin, that have survived from the beginning, and a few other isolated ones, but they're relatively low in number. Beyond that, we move into normal secondary sources for all our history work. If you go through some of the old newspapers, it is astounding how many references that you will find in an era when newspapers tended to be unashamedly conservative or unashamedly nationalist, if you like. So newspapers really provide a bulk of the interaction, the events that are happening, and Grand Lodge still has quite a considerable number of direct references to lodges. Then, of course, there's loads and loads of periphery sources, but that everyone will realise. But you have to go a bit further than Google, unfortunately.
Thanks, Quincey. I've some very complimentary comments coming in. I just want to mention one from a contributor to our lecture series here, Colm O'Rourke from Wicklow, who has some information on the Culkenno Lodge, LOL 1666, and he said he's got some information. He's more than happy to send it on to you. So we'll get that on to you over the next couple of days. So thanks so much, Quincey. I certainly learned a lot of history that I didn't think I was going to be learning in COVID, but this is a great platform, and gives us an opportunity to share history that we wouldn't be learning otherwise. So, and thank you so much for contributing this evening. It's very
can I get the unashamed plug in now, please, Liam?
Oh, you can plug away. Yeah, I told you plug at the end. Go for it.
Anybody that is really interested in these subject matters, my goal is basically I'm writing on every county. every county in Ireland. To date, we have covered 13. There's 13 counties outside Ulster that have been really in-depth covered. And we put these, or I put these into little booklets. Along with other topics, there's now 38 of these booklets. We'll see. 1 second. This is bad Zoom manners, but I'll do it anyway. These are our little booklets of 24 pages that try to introduce the subject matter, give all the information, but in an easily digestible way. These small booklets, I sell them for £3 sterling, €5, a wee bit extra for postage. It's not for profit. Anything comes out of them makes more. There's 13 on Southern Orangism. The latest one is this title on obelisk, which is the history. Very pertinent in the times we're living when we see statues being pulled down. The famous Boyne obelisk that stood for nearly 200 years near Drogheda. So those be books. My Facebook page is called Bygone Days History. If anybody wants to visit it, just send me a message if you're interested or want a list of books. And there's also, I think I started maybe getting online presentations before Trasna, Tíre. I think I beat you slightly.
I think you did. I think you did, yeah.
As soon as the lockdown started, all my bookings, of course, stopped instantaneously, which was annoying because I was due to go to Offaly and I was due to go to Dublin, etc. But we started doing weekly lectures. There's been one every week for about 13 weeks now. Now, all of those can be seen on the Bygone Days History page, Facebook page, or there's a YouTube channel called Bygone Days History. If you put those 3 words in, you'll get it in channels somewhere. Before we go away, I just want to thank Liam for the opportunity. Hopefully I can do something again. And thank you to everyone who's tuned in. I think it's between 70 and 80, 90 or over 80 there. So that's pretty impressive for the times we live in. I welcome all feedback directly, positive or negative. I want it. And anybody interested in the subject matter, or if you think you might know something, please get in touch. Thanks to Trasna, Tíre, thanks to Liam, and thanks to everybody else who has sat in this evening.
And thanks to you, Quincey. And as probably a child who grew up in the 70s or 80s and listening to how different perspectives on our history caused conflict, particularly in the north of Ireland. It's fantastic to be here this evening and having the ability to share our traditions, share our history, and hopefully, I think an understanding of our history will bring us closer together. We'll understand, where we're all coming from, and that's certainly part of the value of what we're doing here at the moment. And thank you for jumping in this evening. We really appreciate it. It was very good of you, and thanks so much for doing it.
Well, as we're approaching the July anniversaries, Orangism has its flaws, but equally it has its positives and its strengths. And when anybody in the South in particular that are reading and watching about Orangism, explore. Orangism is Irish history. Orangism is a fundamental part of Irish history, and Orangism, whilst some can't feel they can give it respect, is certainly worthy of a fair audience and a fair hearing. Thanks again, Liam. Thanks again, Trasna, Tíre.
Absolutely, Quincey. It's part of our Irish history, and a lot of us here where I'm living don't understand it, and you've given it a very good insight this evening. Really appreciate that. So thank you so much. The chat box is just lit up there. There's 36 comments on it at the moment. I'm not going to get to them all, but I'm just going to outline the next couple of lectures. So we've got Liam Cal tomorrow night, talking about the Limerick Soviet that was founded during the War of Independence in 1919. And a good friend of mine, Marianne Marr, on Thursday night with a fascinating lecture, subject of her thesis that she's just completed, ex-serviceman's cottages in Callan, County Kilkenny. So hopefully you can all tune in for those. Thank you so much again, Quincey, and we'll have you back again soon, no doubt.
Thank you. Cheerio.